I'm going to call to order the CSSU Board of School Directors regular meeting for February 17th, 2015. Adjustments to the agenda. Does anyone have any adjustments to the agenda?
I don't have an adjustment to this agenda, but it might be a good time to mention that some of the agendas include an executive session for superintendent evaluation, and they all should. So this is the opportunity for the individual boards to collect input to give to Jean on the superintendent. Okay?
Thank you. Okay. Audience communications. Got anything, Kim? All right, we're making up time fast. So we're on 4.0 presentations, 4.1 risk management. Mr. Boardman, do you want to introduce, or Mike, do you want to tell everybody what Mr. Boardman's doing here for us?
Yes, I did that this morning. I went like this, and I heard a. So I haven't been home yet.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
So we've done this in the past, but it's a real 10,000-foot overview of the different insurance coverages that we provide Chittenden South. So please interrupt if there's any specific questions, because again, it's going to be a real broad overview. If you have, it's property, it's general liability, it's workers' comp, it's crime, not the health insurance, so it's everything else. And I think Bob feels we should do this once a year just to give you a brief overview. And I know we have a couple of new members this year as well, so it's always good just to give you an introduction. And my name is, and I'm Mike Boardman from Hickok & Boardmans, and we're the agent for Chittenden South, and we go out to different insurance companies. Sorry if you can't see me. Can I stand over?
Yeah.
That one turns new, isn't it?
Oh, okay. Bring the mic? No, we'll adjust this. Oh. Pretty sure we're up. So as an independent agent, we go out to different insurance companies and get quotes for Chittenden South. And currently, we're insured on everything except the workers' comp with Liberty Mutual, which is one of the largest insurance companies in the world. And the workers' comp is insured with AmTrust. And we moved to Liberty Mutual 2 years ago. Before that, we were with Trident Insurance Company. And we regularly go out and get quotes from Travelers, Liberty, Trident. Hanover Insurance Company has now entered the public school arena, so we get quotes from them as well. So we test the market on a regular basis. Bob also gets quotes from Visbit as well. So we get a pretty good idea, and it's both coverage and price that we're certainly analyzing when we're evaluating the different the quotes that we get. And Bob and Cindy and Mike, we look at it and we go through everything is, little things is whether one carrier might cover something like parent-teacher booster clubs, something like that. Some carriers don't provide coverage for boosters clubs, some do. So we really go through a fine-tuned analysis of the different coverages. So where we stand today, we're with Liberty Mutual and AmTrust on the workers' comp. And the workers' comp is a different animal. Liberty's not as competitive on the workers' comp. That's why we have it with a different carrier. And there are insurance companies that insure nothing except workers' comp. And that's what AmTrust does. They only insure workers' comp, and they're very competitive. So I don't know if you have any questions. I know this was handed out as summary. I think it was handed out as part of the minutes. And I'll just go through it, just try to highlight some of the coverages that we have here. Please, if you have any questions, feel free to jump in. So we start with just the property, and as you can see, we have a blanket limit of $136 million. So this is all the different buildings. This is all the contents that's within the buildings. And the great thing about a blanket coverage, if you have one fire at CVU, you have that total blanket to fall back on. So we don't have to worry about being underinsured at one of the schools, obviously CVU being the biggest exposure. But we can use all of that $136 million just to this one school if a fire were to occur here. And we also have sub-limits for flood, earthquake, hardware. If we had an electrical arcing that came through the electricity and damaged the server. And then something you're reading a lot about in the paper is data compromise. That's data breach. There's a lot of talk of that in the newspaper. We have $50,000 worth of coverage, and this is both first party and third party. So there's federal requirements that you have to notify if you do have a breach for any entity. It's not just school districts. If you have a breach, someone hacks into your computer, you have to notify everybody who possibly could have been compromised, whose data could have been taken. So that's students' data, it's employee data, any of that can be notified, but it's very expensive. It's amazing. We've had a few of these where we've had coverage for, and it's remarkably expensive when you get into having to comply with all the regulations that the federal government puts on you when you've had a data breach.
Can I just ask, has there been a school, I mean, there been school, are you aware of it happening and what kind of liability? 50,000 doesn't seem like an awful lot if you lost all your student data to the public.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's something we've talked about every year. I'd say it's a little light. I'd say of all of our coverages, this 50,000. I did have another school that did have a data breach, and it was more than 50,000. And it's certainly, the attorneys in the room can comment on it, but it's the cost of notification and you have to hire a specialist, whether it's an attorney or there are specialists that comply just with data breach, and they walk you through everything that you're required to do to comply with the federal law. So I'd say it's probably a little bit light if we did have a data breach. The good thing, the school district, it's a pretty well-known number of people that you'd have to notify, unlike the ones you read about in the paper, the Home Depots and the Targets, where they have to notify they have to notify the whole world.
So this is more the cost of the expert in actually executing all the steps you have to take. It's not somebody suing the school for letting your information out into the...
It's actually both. It's first party and third party. So it's the first party costs you incur, which is all the notification costs, finding out what caused the breach, and then it's the third party if you get sued. But it's also the credit monitoring checks that you're going to want to do. You're going to want to offer that to people who have been breached. You're going to want to be doing credit checks and pay for the credit checks that they're going to want to be doing to make sure that their credit has not been tampered with. So it's...
because it could be their social security number or something that's got
Yeah. And I'm sure the IT department is doing a lot to prevent this from ever occurring. That's a big part of their job, is spending a lot of time on this and trying to prevent this from occurring. But it does happen. Sometimes it's as simple as someone's laptop missing. It does have some confidential data on it, but I'm sure the school district and the supervisory union has some policies and procedures in place about where you're storing data and people taking the laptops off campus and not having confidential data on those laptops. So that's pretty much the property coverage. Then we get into crime coverage. Again, this is something you're reading about in the press as well, quite a bit about, is blanket employee dishonesty. So this is when an employee steals from the supervisory union or one of the schools. You've got $100,000, and then we have in excess of that for those positions within the school district that are more susceptible or have access to cash. Let's put it that way. It's treasurers, it's the finance director. So if they were found to have taken money from the school district, they have up to, the supervisory union has up to $200,000 in that situation. And again, there's checks and balances in place to prevent something like that from happening. We know that. So we don't see that as much, but you do read about it in the paper. Yes?
But given the size of our operating budgets collectively, what is the ratio of coverage to budget? I mean, was there any research done to determine whether 100,000 is a good figure? I mean, I'm thinking of Hardwick Electric, where small entity and it was $1 million pretty
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah, and that was a great example of just having absolutely no checks and balances in place, where that person was able to write checks, and it was, but it's, you're right, I mean, we do look at
How
that.
much would it be to boost the coverage from 100,000 to 1 million or something like that?
Yeah, and that's something we look at every year. I think Bob feels very comfortable with the limit just because of the checks and balances that are in place, the signatures that are required. But it's something we look at every year. We certainly could do it. If we went up to $1 million, it's not inexpensive. I'd say it would probably be $3,000 to $4,000 to get that coverage. Yeah, it's not inexpensive to get that. But it's something we look at every year. We look at higher limits on something like that.
And sort of to that same point, when you say we look at it, you know, we're the fiduciaries for this board and for our local boards. And I don't really recall having, I don't think we have much input into that, right?
I think this is the opportunity to raise the questions, and then we bring it back.
And I raise it in part because at least in our local meetings, you know, we have a lot of community members who say, how come things aren't more transparent here? We put other big ticket items, you know, out to bid, we can maybe get some more understanding, but this seems just a bit more opaque, so I'm just wondering what we can do to provide us with the information, but also,
So I just made a note, should this be a discussion at the retreat?
that'd be
You know,
great.
so that would be a board action, part of your goals for the next year, if you thought there was something that you needed to do around that.
I note underneath that line, blanket employee dishonesty, excess employee dishonesty, and each one of those lines has $100,000. How does that roll up, or how does that differ than the blanket employee? Because this might cover some of those instances that people are wondering about here.
Yeah, and that covers, it's excess, so it's 200,000. It's 100,000 for every employee. If it's one of these employees, it's an extra 100,000 on top of the original 100. So we have 200,000 just for these positions. And I think probably what you were saying is if we were gonna increase, it would probably be in these positions, I would think. Because these positions are really the ones that would have access to cash. And it's, you know, you make a good point. I mean, should Bob come to a meeting and say, okay, this is the checks and balances that we have in place, and just let you know, so that you know this is why he's comfortable with this amount. Because we do talk about it, and he goes through in the application, asks these questions. Are you doing this? Do you have dual signatures? What amount do you need dual signatures?
And it's part of the audit, right?
And I'll just add that this year, the state of Vermont, apparently this is a law that's been in the books a long time, but they did a full-out review at one of the VASBO meetings and encouraged everybody to go through a checklist. I had to go through a checklist to say, what parts of this do I touch? And then, really, it was a great exercise, because there were some things that you just kind of do automatically, don't even think about. So there's a whole other layer of checks and balances now as a result of some of the things that have happened in the state.
That's great.
But to put that out in a package for everybody so that you could see it at the retreat, for example, might be a
I
really,
thought we were supposed to review that as part of the audit, so maybe that got brushed over.
I'll make a note of that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The clerks and the central office folks know that there are so many checks and balances. In fact, I say, do we need all this paperwork, or is there a more efficient way? But the audit, from the outside auditor, will look at our processes and comment, so.
I would just add on that, you know, I don't think our risk management policy should really be a function of our own perceived likelihood of any given event. Like, we're not sitting around putting odds on an earthquake or a flood, because we know that we can't predict it, and these are all very low probability events. But we just don't want to be caught out where, if a low probability event happens, we're underinsured.
Right, and it's worth having a discussion around the decisions that
Representation
Bob
even.
has sent.
Yeah, so I guess I just thought it's maybe more a question of the potential size of the event and you know, what risk we want to take being underinsured versus what our own personal perceptions of likelihood are.
Right.
And the cost of additional insurance, if it's nominal or relatively small.
Yeah. Yep, no, that's a good point.
Look, one small detail on that, does it matter that this says that the finance director and COO are members of the Shelburne School District and not actually of the CSSU?
You have to pay their total salary.
Yeah, and I think that what they mean by that is Shelburne, meaning the CSSU is in Shelburne, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it probably
it's
should,
where they're
that probably
located.
should say CSSU.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point.
All right.
Okay, keep going.
Okay, then we get into the general liability, which is any bodily injury, property damage that the supervisory union is sued for, or one of the schools is sued for, or an employee is sued for. So again, it's bodily injury or it's property damage that's caused by an employee or the supervisory union. So we have $1 million for any one occurrence, and then we have an umbrella that comes on top of that, which is on the next page. And there's additional coverages that are thrown in as part of this policy that we list down below. Nurse professional, that's where all our social workers, counselors, therapists are covered for their professional liability. Students, if they're sued, as part of the student practicum program. We also have sexual misconduct covered under this policy with a limit of $1 million. So I don't know if you have any specific questions about the general liability. This is where the big lawsuits certainly occur. And we certainly have had a few.
So we
Okay.
triggered our excess coverage before,
We did.
but the excess was sufficient to meet?
Oh, yeah, yes. Okay, then the last page, we've got the, I guess the second to last page, we've got the school board, it's called Educators Legal Liability School Board. So this is protecting everybody in this room, it's protecting the boards at each of the schools. If you're sued for decisions that you make that cost somebody else money on the outside world, someone, a parent sues the board for decisions you make that impacted their child's ability to learn. They may sue a teacher for that same exposure. It's also providing coverage on that same policy for employment practices, which is a wrongful termination, discrimination in the workplace, whether it's hiring, firing, not promoting, and you get sued for discriminating based on race, color, creed, all the different illegal means of discrimination. So we have $1 million coverage there, and then this umbrella that we talk about, which is excess liability at the bottom, goes on top of these that we've just talked about. So it provides you another $10 million in addition to the $1 million for the auto, for the general liability, the educator's legal liability, the general liability, and workers' comp as well.
So the educator's legal liability is equivalent to traditional D&O coverage?
Yes, correct. Yep. All right, then the last page, we've got the commercial auto. So this is covering the 66, I think it's 66 buses we have, plus we have some pickup trucks, private passenger vehicles. So we have $1 million on this is, in addition, we have the 10 million. So for any one auto accident, bus goes off the road, children are hurt, we have $11 million. We have the 10 million plus the 1 million. I don't know if you have any questions on the auto coverage at all. And then the last part is workers' comp coverage, which is the most expensive part of all the costs, of all the premiums. And you can see we put down which the experience mod has been, which sort of tracks the loss history of CSSU. And it's below 1. It was above 1 back in 2010, 2011. So we've really been trying to focus on this, trying to get the claims down because it really does affect premiums. And we put here just what the losses have been. As you can tell, we sort of blipped up 11, 12, 12, 13, and we've been spending time trying to get these claims. Cindy's working on this, and we meet regularly trying to manage the claims and trying to get the employees back to work as best we can. Both, most importantly, on their behalf, to manage that claim, to make sure they're getting treated properly, and to get back to work. So this year we've crept up a little bit with our claim activity. So we're trying to manage that as best we can, and that's a whole team of people trying to do this. It's very expensive.
Where do those claims mostly come from? Are they, buildings and grounds type people, support staff, professional staff? Is it a mix or?
Well, Cindy can in terms of the,
I mean, this isn't a factory environment or something where you think, it's an inherently dangerous job.
We have two predominantly, slip and fall, which can be anybody.
Yeah.
Especially this time of year. And then the others are usually lifting or student, attack sounds wrong.
Injury.
But
Assault.
issues interacting with students. Those are the lowest number of that group. It's usually the slip and falls or the lifting. And we have brought in people to train people how to lift appropriately. This year, we just have two really challenging cases that we're being very aggressive with, but we're hoping that number is going to come down, but it's not there yet.
I think 50%, in terms of number of claims, I think 50% of the number of claims have been slips and falls, which we've had a couple of tough winters, as you all know, and it's tough. We try to do everything you can, but that ice and snow builds up, and a lot of it isn't. A lot of it's where the buses are parked that are often not paved parking areas. They're dirt, and bus drivers get out and slip and fall, or they step into a pothole or something. It's lots of times it's not even on premises, it's not even CVU premises, but it may be where they're parking the buses off premises. So it's a broad range of claims. Cindy's seen a little bit of everything.
What are the units for experience mod? Like, what is that number?
Well, that's the average for a school district supervisory unit is for every industry, it's a 1.0. So if your experience mod was a 1.0, it means you are having the average number of claims. So Chittenden South has been below average for the last 3 years. We're going to blip up this year. I put down there the projected mod, what we think it's going to be about a 0.82. It's still definitely below average, which is great. But it's great when it's down in that 0.8, 0.7 area. It just helps us with the premiums so much. And you have more insurance companies that want to insure you when you're down in that 0.7 experience mod.
Okay, thanks.
Mike, if we allow bus drivers to take their buses home, is that an increased exposure for us? If they fall in a pothole in their own driveway, is that triggering coverage under this?
That would be covered, yeah. If they're getting off the bus when they get off at their house. I don't think that's where the claims have been, though. As far as I know, I don't think it's been at the house. It's just some of the parking where we have to, there's just not enough room in that many buses to park them at the school, so we have sort of off-premise parking areas.
The paving project we did at CVU, the bus barn, that has helped tremendously because there was a lot of ice pockets. So, but some of it is just life.
And your bus, Kristen, isn't necessarily a CSSU bus.
Oh, no, there's buses parked in Charlotte that are CVU or CSSU, so I've just noticed that, and I wondered if that was a risk that we should try to reduce, if we're paying extra because we're letting bus drivers do that.
We let bus drivers park off property, so I'm not sure if the buses you're seeing are our buses.
That's an incorrect statement. There
Okay.
are buses that are parked overnight offsite.
I will check in.
Yeah, this is definitely a CBU run that's parked on Spear Street.
There's one that's on Spear Street Extension, just up from the Lewis Creek Bridge.
Yep.
There's one
tell you, bus
driver who
driver.
is allowed because it's actually closer for them to park at home, but that's supposed to be the exception.
We should probably keep going. Is there any other questions?
Bob and I'll have a conversation next week.
Anyone else? Great. Thank you, Mike, for coming in every year and taking us through this. I always think it's going to be like you talking to a vacuum, and then we always have lots of questions, so we'll appreciate it.
Enjoy it. Thank you for having me.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay. 5.0 reports to the board, 5.1 Colt report.
Alrighty. Nice to see you all after a little sojourn away from board meetings. SBAC, Molly, did you want to just do, I mean, we have been preparing for SBAC, it seems like, for the last 2 or 3 years, and it is all coming into focus now, why we've been doing this, and
We are surrounded in a whirlwind of SBAC, I must say. I think I get a note from the AOE every day. If you ever doubted why we have our tech integrationists, doubt no more. They are doing an amazing job of helping to organize at the school level, and I meet with them, and then we spread out the work. At any rate, just so that if you haven't had a chance to read your report, you take note particularly of the paragraph called SBAC results, what can we expect? It's really important to know that the AOE actually will follow on with a note from our Secretary of Education that we expect a significant decline in scores across the country and in Vermont as well. And you can imagine what the reasons are, but certainly one is that the test is very different from NECAP, much more rigorous, much longer, and is just a whole different format for students to adjust to. So the other part of this is that they, by using the 4.2 million students who participated in the field tests, they decided on cut scores, and they have some estimates about where students are going to fall. Just guesses, just based on the field test, but it gives us a sense of what we're accustomed to in NECAP is not what we likely will see. I think Vermont will be higher than the country, but it won't be what we're used to. And they caution us that we not do any comparisons, like when we do our slideshow and we present our data, that we not bring up NECAP beside the SBAC, because it's apples and oranges. They're very different tests. They don't look the same. They don't ask the same things. And they say, just start out of the box this year with your data and move forward, which I think is good advice. So if you haven't had a chance to read all that I just said, it's pretty much right here.
I would just say I'm really proud of the work that our teachers, our principals, Molly, the tech integrationists have done around this. Somebody said, it might have been Greg Marino, and it got passed on to me secondhand, that we're going to do the best job we've ever done on this year. And next year it will be better. Right, and that's the truth. I really do think that we are as prepared for this, and it is thanks to all the people I just mentioned. Really excellent work. I'm in lots of meetings with other superintendents, and I know that there are some people who are just, really, really anxious about this. And I feel like we're not anxious. We're not expecting that we're gonna not see the things that Molly said, but we know that we're prepared. We will definitely have our best foot forward, so happy
Russ,
about
did you have
that.
something?
Yeah, you said cut scores?
So the places at which they decide this is a 3, this is a 4,
So just thresholds?
the thresholds, exactly.
Yeah, it's not like getting cut from the
Yeah.
soccer team.
So they,
Oh, you're out.
really that easy. So they use this great big sample in order to come up with those, and an enormous group of people, educators, actually PTO members, state leaders across the country met to discuss the results of the field test and determine what those benchmarks ought to be. Eric?
Yeah, so on that sort of cut point topic, I think I read that it said for the 11th graders,
Yep.
the expectation was that the percentage of kids that would actually achieve a 4, which is the threshold for sort of qualifying as college course ready, right?
Right.
So you're not taking remedial classes in college.
Right,
The expectation was 11% of kids were gonna
yep,
get to that point.
yep.
It seemed low to me. Do we have a different expectation for CVU? And sort of second part of that question is the SBAC going to be looked at by colleges?
Some will look at it and some will not. Right now, there's not, unanimous decision in the higher ed world that this is what they want to look at when they evaluate a student's readiness to attend their institution or not, but many will. And some, as you just pointed out, are going to, based on whether a student got a 4, not require any kind of remedial course freshman year, which apparently is very common. But not all will do that. So that's the first thing to address. As far as our own expectations, we anticipate that we will have more 4s than 11% of our students. But this is our first time out of the gate. It's a little hard to know. I think this will be a really great baseline, what we get this year, even though it's the first year, and that means there are all kinds of things for us to learn. It'll be a great baseline for us to know. I wouldn't dare speculate at this point, but I speculate that it will be more than 11%.
Yes. When we're looking at this, I would think that our communication about it, this kind of background is maybe something for a CSSU article. Numbers make everybody up in arms. They're never good enough, and so this is such a change. And I've been saying we feel like this is a more accurate assessment of what we teach, but then if it looks like 11%, then they'll say, see, you teach nothing. So just the communication piece, I think, is so important as to how we describe it, explain, or even understand it for ourselves. You understand
I
that.
fully agree with you, and so to that point, the first news article went out in, and I think the high schools just came out as well, the first article that I've written about SBAC, what it is, the background, why we're going to see declining scores, that went out in, I think, every newsletter. And there's a second that'll follow on just before the window opens that'll be even more crisp and to the point. I wish I could write for the Free Press, but
Well, is it,
I'm not going
yeah, I don't know how then, maybe it's board or administration's responsibility, because our broader public,
But we'll definitely have to have more discussion around the
Yeah.
communication plan.
Okay.
Kathy?
As part of that, students very often are very sensitive to test scores. And seeing major declines in their test scores, I think, could be very hard. And so I would hope that we have a good communication plan in place for students especially.
That's a really good point. And certainly our teachers are making plans with their principals about how best to articulate what's going on and that this is different and you will want to persevere and do your best, but it's the very first time we've done this. It will be okay.
Yeah, it's not individual.
K-8s at least don't see their scores.
So to that point, we don't even know if we're going to get a parent report out this year because it's the first year. We haven't been told if we are or aren't. So in many cases, if that's true, students really won't know. Many students would like to know, but be comfortable that we're talking about what the messaging is from our youngest to our oldest kiddos. And it's different. For our 11th graders, we're going to say, persevere, hang in there, this is hard, This is what SBAC is or rather SAT, that's what SAT is becoming, so get used to this, that kind of thing. Okay. So, yeah. And last, Joan, to your point, the Secretary of Education, Rebecca Holcomb, is planning to write an article that will go wide, and that will be a wonderful way for her to have our back and help everybody understand what's going on.
Did your question get covered, Susan?
And can we just have this as a short agenda item on the retreat, perhaps? Just a report back of how it went, what you learned from it.
I don't think we'll know at that point.
Not scores, but
Yeah,
how was it
just in
received?
general,
How was
yeah,
it, like,
we
just-
won't have scores till July.
That's why I'm saying a short turnaround of,
Yeah.
because I think, from what I understand of what
has happened in the SU is that there has been broad support for helping kids get ready and technology in place and so forth, which is not true for a lot of school districts. And so it'd be nice to know if we're going in the right direction. And I think the learning more about the adaptive assessment and how it went for kids, if we can get some feedback from kids of how that worked for them. Because I think everyone knows the branching of the assessment as they're going through it. They're not going to get tortured if they don't know the stuff.
And also maybe just a couple of examples. I hear a lot about how the problems are so different that kids are being asked. So maybe a couple of examples illustrating that would be of interest to the board.
Yeah.
And I just keep thinking too, how we, there's always that concern that our high school kids maybe aren't that serious when they're taking kneecaps. But maybe if there's a stress that some colleges will be looking at that number, maybe that will help kids, so that we can really accurately assess how we're doing.
And the adaptive assessment just may be more engaging to kids.
Yeah.
Because it's going to hit them at their proximal
Right.
point.
Right. Any other topics within the cult report then? I guess we'll be hearing more about the District Management Council after the March meeting. Great. Would you want to touch on the retirement acknowledgements? I have some presents.
They can't leave.
Well, we do want to acknowledge Russ and Susan and Deb, who this is their last meeting because they won't be back in March. And so we just want to give a little appreciation for everything you've done. And I spent big money on recognition things, so I'm going to do it quickly. So I'm going to start with Susan. And Susan not only stepped up to be the CVU chair, which is great, but she's been a really productive member as far as all of the communications she's been doing in particular. So you moved to Virginia, right?
Delaware.
Delaware.
Nobody can remember.
Nobody can remember. Well, I decided that since you do all this writing, that you aren't going to be doing writing for the school board anymore, so I got you a journal, so you can start writing on your journal. And then I wanted one of those pens with like the big feather, and I couldn't find it, but I found this great pen that's the world's biggest pen, and it's got the Frozen girls on it because this was funny until they had a snowstorm in Delaware today. I was thinking, you got to remember how frozen it is up here, so. Pass that over to Susan. Thank you. And so Deb, I was asking some of your peers something good that I could, share about Deb, and everybody said, well, Deb, she's like the perfect school board member. She volunteers. She's always prepared. She has thoughtful input. Don't know what we'd do without her, which is probably all really good for the CSSU, but it's not very funny. So I was kind of stuck. So I said, well, I need something funny. So I said, well, Googling isn't that funny. So I decided I'd go on your Facebook page. So I went into your Facebook page to say, I'm going to find something about Deb that's going to be funny. And the only thing funny I found was that you haven't updated your Facebook page since August of 2012. So now that you have all this spare time, I got you a book about Facebook. So you can update your Facebook page, all right? So. Now, Russ, unlike Deb, there was 100 things I could ask. But I did have
She
one
didn't even
that,
ask me, Russ.
didn't need to.
I found anything on my Facebook page.
Where's your court records?
So Russ has really been not only helpful and it brings a lot of good ideas, but not only does he participate, but he brings a lot of good ideas to everything we do, and totally invaluable on really game-changing things that we've tried to do as an SU, and so really couldn't have done it without you, Russ. But I decided this would be a good memento that you can keep.
If we were red.
Use that line a lot.
Can you wear that to town meeting?
We may need to borrow it back a few times, but really, and Colleen,
Maybe
because
I'll come back to meetings as a member of the public
There you go.
You'll be assigned to a committee.
There's more discussion about that. That's right. A lot, right, for sure.
But really, I know this is like one more thing you have to do as a board member when you've already got a busy plate and not just coming to the meetings, but serving on the committees and really contributing. And so we really want to thank all of you guys for all the work you've done. Colleen, do you want to add anything? Because most of them were on your board as well.
No, I'm just so incredibly appreciative of the talent and the generosity that all three of you have brought to the board. I mean, you really, I think, model what we all need in ideal board members. You have your own thoughts and you're willing to share your different perspectives, and yet when it comes down to the hard work, you're willing to work with everybody else and all for the benefit of kids. And I'm just really going to miss having you guys on our committees. And I'm hoping to get you on committees that I might be working on, but thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
I know we have a few other administrative retirements coming up, but we have another shot at you guys, so.
Right. They're listed here. Molly, obviously, you all know that Molly's retiring at the end of this year. You hired Jeff Evans, who was the unanimous choice of the hiring committee. And we're looking forward to that transition. Not that we won't miss you, Molly, but that'll be great. John Straza, who is the special ed administrator in Shelburne, is also leaving. He's in a doctoral program at UVM, and it doesn't really work to be a half-time person and do the doctoral program simultaneously. And Connie Engel, who is the special ed administrator in Charlotte, is retiring. So, as you said, we'll have another shot at that.
You guys can't leave yet. All right, thank you. 5.2, second quarter financial management report. In your package, was there any questions? Mike, I love the new format. It's so much easier to understand this page than the whole report, so.
Glad you enjoyed the executive summary that I
Executive
created.
summary. I was just gonna ask one question, just so you know I read it. The adjustments under food service?
Food service, what we do is we will true up at the end of the year based on the actual expenditures, the assessment. So the assessment will equal the actual expenditures in food service. That's why there are adjustments versus budget.
Anybody else have any questions? Otherwise, we're in good shape. Nothing to worry about, Mike, right?
Correct.
Good.
We're in good shape, yes.
All right. We are on to 6.0, discussion matters, 6.1, key legislative issues, and I'm only mindful of the time. So is there anything that we really should discuss today that?
Our legislative breakfast is set for Monday, April early.
Third?
The third. I think so.
Not the day before town meeting, it's be the 10th.
April 6th.
Oh, April, right.
Yeah, 6th.
I'm off a month.
It's the 6th, it's a
Okay.
Monday. And, you know, committees will, I think, have substantial work done by then in terms of property, funding issues, things like that.
We're still getting the notes from VSBA, so.
And I will just say, you approved a committee earlier this year around governance structure, and you said, we'll let that committee kind of like lay low unless it looks like they should start paying attention. And I would just say, if you're on that committee, you should start paying attention, because there's lots of stuff happening.
Okay.
There's stuff happening, I think, in both the House and the Senate, and so,
Okay, we'll try to get that.
just to know.
We didn't really pick a chair, and I probably should just get it kicked off.
Okay.
And then we'll-
And we need a community member, right?
With a cool T-shirt. Okay,
Can I just ask Joan one quick question about
Yep.
the structures that might be coming out? Like, in, I don't know, 50 words or less, could you explain some of the philosophies around the impact of income-based funding versus property-based funding that are being discussed? Because I just think it's transferring
Right.
pain from one hand to the other, and curious what the thoughts are there.
I think that the current, maybe you'd be better to answer this, but I think that the current funding structure has so many wrinkles in it in terms of who gets subsidized and at what rate, and what that does to then people voting on it, that whether or not people's voting patterns are aligned with whether or not there is an impact on their own pocketbook. They're imagining if it went to a straight income, they wouldn't have to have that kind of convoluted. But I think that there's a whole lot more there than just that, too. And I know that my last conversation with Bob, he wasn't prepared to say whether or not it was a big deal or not, because he said, there's like 8 pages of verbiage behind it. He wanted to look at it more closely to see what it all meant.
If I can add just one little piece, and it's a much bigger conversation. Income is not as stable as
yeah.
property. And can you imagine if we were basing everything on 2008, 2009, with income declining drastically? So maybe somewhere in between where there's a base and then income levels. I've not experienced folks not looking diligently at budgets because they get income sensitivity. But that's maybe somebody else has experienced that, or a belief system. I think our voters don't always, they either back education or not sometimes, and not, it's going to affect my tax rate at this amount or more or less, from what I've experienced.
Okay. Action matters. We're on 7.0. Can I have a motion to reaffirm the retreat date of Monday, June 1st? So moved. Thank you, Kathy. Second? Come on, Susan, get your seconds in. It's your last opportunity.
I'll second.
Thank you, Susan. Any discussion on this? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Thank you. The ayes have it. Can I have a motion to reaffirm the board meeting date? This is not really reaffirming. This is
the
affirming.
reminder.
Yeah, affirm the new April board meeting date of Tuesday, April 14th. Motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Russ. Come on, Deb. Second. Thanks. So, any discussion, as you read in the package, our regular meeting date will fall during the school break, so we're just moving it. So, any other discussion around that? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Guys have it. Can I have a motion to move the employment of our paraprofessionals to the SU?
So moved.
Thank you, Colleen. Second. Thank you, Kathy. Cindy?
Can you clarify that memo, or motion to be the special ed service plan employees?
Yeah.
Thank you. As amended.
Please.
Yes. As Cindy stated.
Friendly amendment. Everybody understands what we're voting on? All in favor, say aye.
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just thought we were done discussing.
Can I have a quick refresher on what this is?
Yes. So this,
And what discussions or conclusions you reached with the union?
yep. So this is Act 153, 156, that requires that special ed programming, budgeting, resourcing, supervision, evaluation, all of it, with one little teeny tiny exception, is mandated to be at the SU. And the little teeny tiny exception that they made very late last year was that paras could be hired locally. And initially, we thought that meant that paras and the budgeting and the programming and the supervision and evaluation, blah, 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 would stay local. And we recommended them that you leave them local. Over the summer, independently, Molly and I were going to meetings and hearing that, we might have misunderstood that. And upon digging in deeper, we realized keeping the paras locally means that their paycheck is a local paycheck. That's it. The hiring, the supervision, the programming, the budgeting, everything else stays at the SU. So that made no sense to us, because if we do that, there is a, you pay for it, you charge us, we give you the money back. And there is 7 books that need to be kept by Bob Mason and Company, and also Excel files by Cindy to do that, and you get nothing for it. So met with the association back in October, and the concerns that they expressed were control direction from 2 different entities. That wouldn't change, and we have no intention from the SU to control what's going on. I can't tell you, including just this afternoon, I say I don't run the schools. I support the work of the administrators in running the schools, but I'm not running the schools. Our reassignment, permanently or long-term, including between districts, and that's a negotiations piece that we're working out. And the basis for definition of special education, and you just heard Cindy speak to that. Retirement, and I know that you're working on that, Cindy, right? And supervision and assignment responsibilities. So I sent Fran a note 2 weeks ago saying, hey, just want to remind you that this meeting is going on, and then I happened to have a meeting with her last week and said again, and she said, I said, so you're welcome to come to the meeting, and she said, but it's really a done deal, isn't it? And I said, well, I believe that there's going to be support for the motion, but I want you to know that I have shared your concerns with the board before, and I would be happy to share them again and let them know that we believe we've resolved them. And she said, thank you very much. So,
Thank you very much.
does that help?
I figure it's been a long time since the last 3 times we've discussed this.
It really-
Thanks for bringing that up, Keith. Anybody else have any questions or discussion? Okay. Are we ready to vote? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? You have any abstain? Abstain? You want a reason for the record, or? Do you?
Wife's paired, not special, but
She is too special.
Put that on the record.
I have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved?
Thank you, Kristen. Second? Second. Thanks. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Might I jump in for just a second before you confirm next meeting dates?
Sure.
Because I did get this data, and I bet many of you are curious, the whole measles epidemic. So I asked Sandy to send a note to the nurses to find out, and for us, we are at 97.4, 99.5, 96.6, 97.4, 96.4, and 98.1.
Wow.
So we're high in immunization for that. So I thought you would be interested in that, given the buzz around that these days.
Is that just measles, or is that?
That's
all-
MMR.
MMR, okay.
Right, but across the board, you can see, we're high in all of them. Some of them were 100%.
But isn't it like 6% of the population not being immunized becomes problematic? I mean, we're at that threshold, if you were saying 94%.
I didn't say 9, I said 97, 99, 96, 97, 96, 98, and it's all
Oh,
point
I'm sorry.
something.
I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
heard 94.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Okay. As I confirm next meeting date, for the record, we started 15 minutes late, so it's not my fault that we're late. Because we didn't have a quorum, so. Okay, confirm next meeting date. I do want to point out the March regular meeting that the local boards go first. It's actually a typo, and my local boards start at 5 or 5:30, whenever the local boards choose to start, and then, because they have to.
We
elect
will
our
have that
representatives.
conversation when we have the agenda meetings, whether they need to be here at 5 or 5:30.
Okay. But then we start at 7. Board chair
Right.
meeting. Thursday, we have the superintendent evaluation meeting at CSSU at 6 o'clock. Some of you are telling me you didn't have it on your calendar, so put it on your calendar. Missing anything else on calendar and dates?
I'm sorry, what's that date again?
Which, Thursday?
This Thursday?
Please come.
Do we have a
6 o'clock.
That's a good question. Sandy, can we check and see if we have a quorum?
I can send
Thanks.
that out. I haven't gotten it.
Thank you. Okay. 6 o'clock
At CSSU.
at CSSU.
and CSSU board members?
CSSU board members only. Thursday at 6. And with that, we're on to the common topic.
essentially, I've crafted this around what I think the board is looking for, but if I haven't given, if I don't answer some of your questions, feel free to pause and I'll try to do that. And I also am very glad that I have a couple people who are going to join at the end, because one of the things that the board asked to hear about is some of the work that's going on in our system in addition to our required programs in early ed. And so Greg Marino from Charlotte and Victoria Francis from Williston are going to share a little bit of that local work. There's a lot of really great things happening in CSSU right now around early ed. So what I am going to talk about is I'm going to give you a little bit of context about why high quality early ed is important. And unless you've been living under a rock, you probably know most of this, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But I do think it's important to remind us why we do pay attention to this age group. Then I will talk a little bit about the services that are available to all CSSU students and what those are. You've asked some specific questions about the differences between Act 62 and Act 166, so we'll talk about that. And then we will talk about the projects and programs that are happening in addition to and in conjunction with the things that we're required to do to sort of further our early ed experiences. All right. So why do we talk about early education? So these are things that you hear about when you listen to the news, when you hear the president speak or the governor speak. 90% of brain development occurs before a child turns 5. So a lot of this information you've also heard when we talk about the achievement gap, and how we would be most suited in addressing that has a lot to do with this. The early experiences that kids have form either a sturdy or a fragile foundation on which they're going to build everything else in their life. Kids living in poverty arrive at school with significantly less linguistic knowledge. There are a lot of other statistics that I could add to this. One of the things that's interesting is this last bullet. Molly and Elaine and Jeff Evans and I were at a meeting where Rebecca Holcomb was talking about early ed, and one of the things that she pointed out that we know is that by the time students are 2 years old, kids, by the time kids are 2 years old, they already have a 6-month gap in language. So one of the things to realize is that a lot of the new laws that have been passed are about preschool education, but if so much happens by the time they even turn 2, then we have to look even farther below age 3. So that's part of why this is so important. And when we're talking about students at risk, so students living in poverty, students who don't, whose English is not their first language, students with developmental issues, when they don't have access to high quality early childhood experiences, 25% are more likely to drop out of school, 40% more likely to be a teen parent, 50% more likely to be eligible for special education, 60% less likely to attend higher ed, and 70% more likely to be arrested. And some of these are pretty staggering statistics, but you've probably heard things like this. So why is early ed important? What could we do to sort of support that? This is a graph, and you have a bigger version of most of these charts in your packet, but this just talks about the return on your dollar invested, if you want to look at it that way, and what we get out of things that we do very early in life versus the payback that we get on things that we do later in life. And the other thing that you'll notice is I'm talking about early childhood education or high quality early ed experiences. That doesn't necessarily mean formal preschool in all ways. It means that students have access to a variety of high quality early ed experiences. That could be playgroups, that could be community-based access to rich experiences. It isn't just about preschool. Okay, so you have a bigger version of this chart, but I'm going to work over this to talk about, these are sort of required programs that exist in our communities that serve students birth until they hit kindergarten. So the first one is Children's Integrated Services, Early Intervention, CISEI, an acronym that you used to see because it used to fall under our umbrella. This is essentially early intervention or special education services for young children, 0 to age 3. It is now, as of July 1st, 2014, falls under the purview of the Agency of Human Services. It's no longer a school responsibility to evaluate or to serve this population of students, which, as you'll recall last year, is a shift in our practice. Because we've been so invested in kids birth to 5, we provided those services, and this shift in law was a shift in practice for us. Here are our numbers. So right now, and these are, one thing to know, these are point-in-time numbers. So these numbers change frequently, especially the ones on the end. That's how many students birth to 3, children, I should say children, are being served right now in CSSU towns. That number, that total of 21, is really low. And we're concerned about that in the sense that we typically serve around 35, give or take, at any given time. So we're really looking and working hard at our outreach and our child find. Are there kids that are experiencing developmental delays that we're not finding for whatever reason? This middle row, I should pause. Questions about birth to 3 services? Russ?
So if that's not the agency, the responsibility of the Agency of Human Services, why are we, if assuming we're talking about the school district, looking for it?
Yep. A couple of reasons. One of them is one of the things school districts are still required to do is be a primary referral source, which means we still have to find them and then funnel them off to CIS. So that's the first piece. And the second piece is we have a vested interest in the kids that transition between these 2 programs, because we're typically going to inherit them, and we have to start collaborating right around age 2, 2.5, if those kids are going to come into EEE.
And what happened with the funding for that? I assume it was out of the education fund at one point. Is it still?
Yeah,
Even though responsibility is transferred to the...
Correct. Well, what's interesting, and folks at the Agency of Human Services would tell you, they didn't receive any additional funding to take on the role that previously was provided by schools. So the next piece is EEE, or Early Childhood Special Education. This is special education for kids aged 3 to 5. Services in our system are provided in multiple settings. All 4 of our K-8 buildings have a preschool, a school-based program that's inclusive. The definition of inclusive for special ed purposes in preschool is 50% or more students who don't have disabilities. Sometimes we'll call them peers. This is part of the CSSU special ed budget. That's how it's funded. It is not a reimbursable special ed services. 3 to 5 services have never been reimbursable, but they are a special ed service. It's overseen by the Agency of Ed, and that's where we follow our state and federal special ed regs. And those are our numbers. Not all of our students, just a second, Josh. Not all of our students are served in those school-based programs. We also serve students sometimes at home, sometimes their parents will bring them in, and sometimes we'll serve them in a community-based program.
Are there no Medicaid dollars attached to these kids who participate in this program?
If a student is eligible for Medicaid and receives a high level of service, we do get Medicaid reimbursement. Yes.
And what percentage typically?
So that's kind of a complicated service. What they do is they determine a level of care, and the level of care is based on how much service a student gets. So if a student has a paraprofessional who provides personal care support, receives OT, PT, they're going to get more Medicaid reimbursement, or we're going to draw down more reimbursement. So it's not a flat rate. But yes, we do get Medicaid reimbursement at least.
How or where are these children being identified, especially the very youngest ones?
So most of Chittenden County actually is very strong in collaborating regionally with referring. So most of our referrals come from physicians. They can come from child care centers. Because we partner with so many child care centers, we have a good relationship with them. We get referrals that way. Play groups. So there's lots of different ways. Actually, anyone could make a referral. If you have someone that you wonder you could support that family in referring them. But primarily it's physicians and younger siblings of kids in our system. All right. And the last piece is early learning partnerships. So this is universal preschool. This is and we'll talk in just a second about the differences between Act 62, which we've participated in voluntarily for a number of years, and the new law that goes into effect. But essentially, this is providing 10 hours a week of publicly funded preschool to an approved community-based early ed program for 3- and 4-year-olds and any 5-year-old who's not enrolled in kindergarten. Funding for this is local school budgets. In the CSSU budget, you fund the program oversight. It's Agency of Ed who oversees this, and currently rules are in development for Act 166 because that's the new law. And those are our numbers. We serve a lot of students in CSSU for early ed, and we count those students.
Again, why is Williston so low?
Great question, and we're going to talk about that in a second. I'm actually not going to answer that question specifically, but you're noticing something that the rest of the system, including Williston, noticed, and we'll talk about the steps that we're going in to try to understand why that is. Good observation. All right. So I'm going to talk about the differences. So Act 62 is the program that we have participated in. It's a law voluntarily. And Act 166 is the universal pre-K law that, as you know, was slated to be implemented July 1, 2015, was delayed for official implementation to 2016, except that schools and districts can implement as of this coming July, and this board opted to continue or to move forward with full implementation. So Act 62, the previous law, provided 10 hours a week for interested families in participating districts. The key there is voluntary. So we opted to participate in Act 62. With Act 166, when it's fully implemented, it provides that service for all families. School districts don't have the ability to say, no, we're not participating. So it's voluntary, and the schools determine whether and how many programs we partner with. With the Act 166, the school would be obligated to distribute funds to any program that meets the quality standards. So we don't have the ability to sort of pick and choose. One thing to just realize, because of how we implemented Act 62, we already partner with every program who meets quality standards and who wants to partner with us. So there's not a big difference for us as we move forward. Actually, we're hoping we'll get more partners with Act 166 because people are going to start realizing that it makes sense to partner with school districts. With Act 62, the schools count a prorated count of their preschool children as part of their ADM, and they used a 2-year average to do that. With Act 166, same thing, we count the prorated student count, but we do it in the current year. So we don't have to wait 2 years to see that. In Act 62, the schools determined how much money we distributed to schools. There was a formula we had to use to come up with that. And with Act 166, there's a statewide rate. Right now, that's at $3,000. Act 62, we could limit how many kids accessed. We could set a budgeted amount and not exceed that amount and essentially turn away students. Act 166, you cannot turn away students no matter what time in the year they enroll. That is a big difference, but it's a difference that we anticipated coming, and so we budgeted this way starting 2 years ago. So we've been operating in sort of a accept any student for a number of years. Same quality requirements for both programs in terms of the programs we partner with. They still need to be, they have to have 4 or 5 stars. Stars is a Vermont quality rating. Or they have to have 3 stars and a plan to get their 4th. Sorry for the typo. Programs have to employ a licensed teacher. Act 166 also requires home-based programs to employ or access or consult with a licensed teacher. And for some home-based programs, that's going to be a hardship. So that is a slight difference between the two laws. In Act 62, we could make our own decision about whether or not we would partner with a program outside of our boundaries. In Act 166, if you want to limit your partnerships, you have to petition the state, and they will help you draw a region. We have not limited ourselves to partners. We partner with schools in Addison County, all around Chittenden County, So we have a pretty broad web. Yes.
How does the statewide rate of 3,000 compare with what we get by counting, prorating them for ADM?
Do you,
It's close.
yeah,
It's close.
close in the favorable to us.
Started at
Yes.
2,200 and over the past year, so it's gone up small amounts.
But the base amount is 8,000 something, and this is 40% of the
Correct.
base amount, so
Yep,
favorable to us, I think.
yep. Good question. Any other questions about the differences between, yep, Josh?
Not maybe the differences, but qualifications.
Yep.
So is there income sensitivity to take advantage of this?
For the community-based programs?
Yeah.
So, their income sensitivity in the sense that kids accessing, you mean to help those programs be able to achieve this?
So in the sense, can any child, regardless of family income,
Yes,
access these services?
absolutely, yes. That does not factor in at all. If you have a 3 or a 4-year-old enrolled in an approved program for 10 hours a week, you draw down that funding. Thanks, sorry, I didn't quite get your question.
What's CSSU's relationship with the licensed educators who have to be part of the programs if CSSU has oversight or some responsibility for some of the program? I understand it all goes up to the agency.
Yeah. It's a good question. We don't have any supervisory relationship with those teachers. They're employed by those community-based programs or they're contracted by the home-based providers. They get their license through our LSB. Through our local standards board, which is interesting. 2 years ago, 3 years ago is when that started happening. So that was a change. They come to, if the program is in Heinsberg, they go through Heinsberg's local standards board. So from that sense, they get their license through us, but other than that, we don't supervise. Our Sherry Carlson, who coordinates this for us, does do site visits in our community-based programs so that, and we have a pretty active early learning partnership structure, but it's definitely not a supervisory capacity.
Just in light of the insurance presentation by earlier tonight, is this covered or are we potentially liable?
Good question. We, in our previous contracts under Act 62, we used to require proof of the program having liability that matched ours. The new law prevents us from requiring any additional liability. But at the end of the day, they are their own program. And so they are the ones liable should there be an event in there. We asked for that extra piece as part of our contracts, but we really can't require it anymore. But it would be them that would be liable, even though they're expecting or they're accessing funds, public funds. Good question. Other questions? Okay. Okay, just a little bit more about early childhood special education and the differences between birth to 3 and 3 to 5. So as I said before, birth to 3 services are funded, overseen, and provided by the Agency of Human Services. We, as you know, last year, we formerly had 2 early interventionist positions, and with the change in law, we no longer needed those positions. So both those positions were reduced. We did, though, create 1 early childhood outreach special educator position, and this position has been really phenomenal for us in being able to maintain our connection with Children's Integrated Services, effectively transition kids, and we've also broadened the way that we can provide services. So she's been able to serve students in preschools outside of our boundaries. Kids that in the past, if they became eligible in May and there weren't slots in our local schools, they'd have to wait until the fall. She's able to serve those students now. And she's also working very closely with Victoria, who you'll meet in a second, around outreach activities and working on those low numbers that we're concerned about. So this is a really important position for us. And then EEE services, I kind of talked about this already, provided by CSSU. It is part of our special ed responsibilities. We have school-based classrooms, and we have services provided elsewhere. These are our required special ed programs that we have. Okay, so now I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk to you a little bit about the innovation and the additional work beyond these programs that's happening in CSSU. About 3 years ago, we convened the early ed leadership team, and we did that because we knew that we had all these pieces of early ed, special ed, Act 62 at that point, birth to 3 services, but those programs never really intersected. And we never pulled it together in a really cohesive way. So we convened this team. This team is made up of administrators. We have a couple of EEE teachers. We have some community-based partners. Sherry Carlson, our ELP coordinator. This year we've started to include some kindergarten teachers in some of our subgroup work. And we're working on some parent involvement. This group comes together and 3 years ago sat down and said, what do we want to know about early education, and developed a list of questions. Out of those, we spent a year researching the answers to those questions and sort of put out our early ed white paper. There's a link here. If you care to read the entire paper, you're welcome to open up the link. But these are the recommendations that came out of the white paper. So one of the recommendations are expand our efforts to identify students not enrolled in pre-K. This goes to your question. One of the things that we looked at that really jumped out for us is Williston had a very low percentage of kids who were accessing preschool. Now that means kids that we knew about. Doesn't necessarily mean there aren't kids accessing preschool, but we wanted to know more about that. So that was one of our recommendations. We wanted to expand our participation in our early learning partnership collaboration. So we have these structures that interface with community-based partners, but Sherry Carlson was the only really connection between CSSU folks. You know, we don't have principals or kindergarten teachers accessing that group. We wanted to consider ways to improve collaboration between schools and families of young kids. How do we welcome families into our system before they're even at kindergarten age? This bullet examined the full continuum of placements available in CSSU for young children with special education. We want to make sure that families who have a young child with a disability has choice in where they want their kids to be educated. Some families really value and appreciate our school-based programs. Some families really value and appreciate the high-quality child care center that they've been attending. And they want to be able to take their services and have them in multiple settings. So we really needed to work on the options that families have. And we also had a recommendation about evolving the role of our Birth to 3 program to expand our outreach. This is actually an area we've come pretty far on because of our outreach, shifting our position to an outreach coordinator. So this is the SU level work. This team meets a few times a year, sort of shapes our work for the year, and underneath that work is local level work. And so there's a lot of really innovative things happening right now in our system. I'm going to ask first, I guess I have Williston on top, so I'll ask Victoria to join first. And I asked Victoria and Greg just to come and talk a little bit about what they have, not to be really formal, but feel free to ask them questions. I think you should be really proud of some of the work that's happening because there's a lot. So this is Victoria Francis. She is Williston's outreach coordinator.
Hello. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for inviting me to come. I'm not sure if you even knew I was going to be here, but it's great. It's exciting to be able to share a little bit about Williston, what Williston is doing. So you have a packet coming around. One is just gives a little overview about the outreach position in Williston. And I'll talk to a little bit about that. It was started, the outreach in Williston was started as a grant from the Agency of Ed called the Early Ed Initiative. And that was strictly focused on reaching at-risk kids. And Williston had noticed that we did have these pockets of poverty and ELL students that maybe didn't know about opportunities that were available to them. So somebody wrote the grant for that before I came along, and it was a .4 position. And this grant is not a sustaining grant, but every year for 3 years, we grew the program a little bit and found other ways to reach these families. And until last year, we got the grant, and now it's locally funded. So it's a .8 position. And with the continued, the goal is to make sure that all children in Williston and St. George, ages 3 to 5, have the opportunity to have quality early ed experiences. But we're focusing, making sure we catch that at-risk group. So Megan talked a little bit about the at-risk group, but the way that the Agency of Ed categorizes it and the way that we are qualifying most of the kids for this are children from families where English is a second language, children from families who are economically disadvantaged, and children who are developmentally delayed by at least 25% in one of the domains but do not qualify for IEP services. So, some of the things that we do in Williston for the outreach focus is identify those who qualify for the Early Ed Initiative and facilitate placement in quality programs. In the past 3 years, we have identified 31 children in Williston and St. George alone. And those are some kids that we think maybe wouldn't have had access to quality programs or any programs, really. I do ongoing support to students and families in the home, school, and community setting. We collaborate with early care organizations such as the Howard Center, local, the Early Learning Partners and non-partner programs, the school-based EEE, professionals in the building such as SLPs, the ELL teachers, and math and literacy coordinators. Another big part of my job right now is increasing the partnership enrollment. And 3 years ago when I started, 19% of our programs in town were, had gone through the process to become quality programs, and now we're up to 56%. So that's pretty exciting. And it doesn't mean that these programs aren't high quality programs, it just means they haven't gone through the process or they felt uncomfortable going through the process. So part of my role has been developing relationships with all of those programs. And Williston, when I started, had 21 programs, which is a lot for one community, and now we have 16. And some of them are home-based programs. So also, I do a variety of community outreach events, and there's some on one of the pages of the handout that kind of give you an idea of that. And what we've sort of are easing into is supporting the successful transition to kindergarten. And I'm currently working with guidance on coming up with a year-long plan for monthly outreach efforts in that pre-kindergarten year. So the goal really is to have all of these children really already feel like they belong to our school. And it's great because with the universal pre-K, now this is what we need to do, is start considering them our students by age of 3. So some of the outreach activities are regularly scheduled events, community events for children and families, and community events for the early care and education providers. Some of the regularly scheduled things that I do is visit certain community partners programs, and it might be a program that has a child that they've flagged as having some concerns. So I'll go in and we'll meet with them regularly and sort of decide what angle they're looking for guidance on, go back to the building, and then I can have consult with professionals, special educators, SLPs are the two most common ones, and the ELL teacher. I also do weekly home visits and also to non-partner sites, and that's a good use of time because we want these non-partner sites to become partners eventually, and that's what we're working towards. We do some monthly visits. That's, again, the share and support is something new that last year I started. We have a couple of programs that happen to have a lot of children that they have some concerns about. So I've been trying to go in quarterly with a provider, a special educator from our building. It's been the SLP, going in and just sort of troubleshooting and offering some support systems that they could do in their program with all of the children, but that would help the particular children that they're thinking of. I do monthly check-ins with all of our ELPs just to make sure that they don't have any concerns. Also with the non-partner programs, where I share information and invitations to encourage partnership. And quarterly, we have the ELP meetings where all of Chittenden County partner programs are there, directors are usually there. And Starting Points is a home provider support group. And they invite me to their groups quarterly as well. So some of the community events that we've recently done just in this school year is a Count Me In Exploring Math with Your Preschooler that we've collaborated with the Williston School District Math Coordinator, and that's at the public library. Another one with the public library is More Than Feelings, a social emotional story hour. And this is something that's really big because when we talk to the kindergarten teachers about what are the things you really want all of these quality programs out in town to know about, they say social emotional development, that's where they're noticing things. So we're putting a big push into that. We also, Megan didn't touch about this, but this was more on the district level. We just had an early education meet and greet for the whole district that we hosted in Heinsberg, and we had a huge turnout on a Saturday morning. Every early educator in the district attended, special educators, early educators, SLPs, and we were all there, and we set up this fabulous fun day, and we had 35 children attend, birth to 5. So that was really great. Some community events for providers. This same social emotional professional development I offered to a group of people at the library in conjunction with the library again. And that was part of the Race to the Top grant. They did a library Mother Goose social emotional curriculum that they offered all librarians, and then they were charged with then bringing it to their communities. And our librarian asked me to help her out with that. Also, literacy and math professional development for Williston Early Learning Partners. I'm working with Caitlin Bianchi and Carol Huntington, the literacy and math coordinators, to do a professional development for our Williston providers. And the idea may be that if that goes well, that we could reach that out to district-wide partners. I put a survey out at the beginning of the year asking partner programs, what is it that you would like from us? Would you like some professional development? What time of day? For your whole staff or just for the directors? And they gave us some great feedback. And we're going for math and literacy at the library in the evening, so that's what they want. And then the other thing is strengthening families training. We're currently in the middle of that right now, which is an 8-week professional development for early learning partners in all of Chittenden County, in all of CSSU. And again, that's held in Williston because that seems to be a good meeting spot. And we're Thursday nights we do that, and that'll be our module 6. Module 7, one more after this. So, and also another thing that we decided to try at the beginning of this school year was an early educators professional book group. And I thought that might be a good idea to get people just in our own district thinking about the same topics and trying to meet a few different times while doing some similar professional reading. And then if that went well, maybe putting it out to some of our partners in town. I would probably do that just in Williston. It was difficult. It's difficult to get people to come together, but everybody was enthusiastic about the topic, but it seems like it might be better suited for something in-house or something that's close. But in the meantime, it was a good experience, and we read an anti-bias education for young children and ourselves. The only thing, not that I'm doing this year, but doing all of this outreach work last year got us thinking that we're doing really great stuff, recognizing and finding these children when they're young and getting them connected to quality early education programs in the school year. But it started dawning on us, these at-risk children, what were they doing in the summer? So last summer we piloted a summer program for this group of children, and that's 4 weeks in the month of July, 3 days a week from 8:30 to 11:30, and we were able to invite, we had over 25 we wanted to invite, but that was too many, so we invited 18, 14 attended, and our requirement was that they needed to be able to attend all 4 weeks, and it was staffed by an SLP and an early educator, and it was a great success, and we plan to do it again this year. So that's, in a nutshell, what Williston Early Ed Outreach looks like. Do you have any questions?
Was the summer program entering kindergartners, or was it?
It was a combination. So we had 4-year-olds. Well, the options that we could have chosen was new 3-year-olds that were identified and would be attending programs in the fall, thinking that might be good to help transition them in. The 4-year-olds that would be their second year of preschool, and then the 4 and 5-year-olds that were going on to kindergarten. We did the top 2. We did not bring the 3-year-olds in. And 7 out of the 14 were moving on to kindergarten. And 7 out of the 14 were dual language learners. And 9 of them were either a combination or low SES.
This is, I think, more a question for Megan. Do we track the academic or performance of these kids in the EEI program through K-12?
It's a really good question, and one thing that the early ed leadership team wants that information. Now that we have VCAT and can start being able to flag those students who accessed early learning partnerships, we will be able to track that information moving forward. The other thing that we're spending a lot of time on right now, all of our partner programs have to use something called TS Gold, which is an assessment, early assessment program related to the curriculum that they're being taught, but that's a universal assessment that's given in all partner programs. It's required as part of Act 166. We're trying to figure out what's the best way for us to encapsulate that data and keep track of it so that incoming kindergarten teachers have something useful. So yes, we don't have that right now, whether that is exactly the kind of information we're starting to gather. Thank you very much, Victoria. Greg is going to share a little bit about some work happening in Charlotte.
So this is really exciting to hear all of that work. This is just a really very modest and very simple idea, but that we're excited about nonetheless. And it's the idea of this Charlotte Coalition for the Young Child. And the question was asked, what positive impacts to young children and their families can come of the creation of a local coalition of community partners with a focused mission around engaging with and supporting the families of our youngest children. So Megan used the word intersect, and that kind of jumped out at me when I heard it, because one of the things I've run into as a principal, and I've noticed since I've gotten to Vermont, is that the world of birth to 5 in Vermont is really intricate, it's really convoluted, it's really various. Based on where you are in the state, it could look completely different. And I found, I get this image of kind of pickup sticks, and you got a dozen pickup sticks and kind of drop them. And the intersections of the school and the world of birth to 5 seem to be pretty haphazard and random, and oh boy, look what I just learned because I happened to bump into this situation. So the idea of this coalition is to see what can be done about that and to how to make those intersections and connections more purposeful. So some of the things that that kind of created the rationale for pulling this group together, the disconnection between the realm of the young child and family, I just spoke to that, and the public elementary school, the school in a person's community. A need for more purposeful contact between families of young children and our school, a need for more robust communication and collaboration between our school and various communities agencies. Victoria just pointed to so many examples of that. And insufficient knowledge and understanding among some families and community partners about their own public school and their own community. So the action, again, very, very simple idea. Establish a local young child coalition in Charlotte made up of early education partners, families of young children, child care and service providers, and other individuals with a commitment to supporting young children and their families. And the goal is increasing mutual awareness, knowledge, understanding among members of the coalition in support of all children's physical, social, and emotional well-being. So the idea, again, very simple, bring people who are concerned about the same thing, the success of our youngest children, to the table from a lot of different agencies and a lot of different pockets of support for those people, and let's get them around the same table and talk about how we can do a better job of meeting that group's needs. So what we've accomplished so far, where we started was basically with a small core group of staff at Charlotte. And obviously those included the people who had key connections to our youngest learner, our early educator, special educator, kindergarten teachers, school counselor, our nurse, and we got together and we brainstormed a little about this idea. Next thing we did was create a contact list, just a really simple spreadsheet. Who is it that we would imagine would be good to have at the table? So we brainstormed people like the partner preschools, local pediatricians, local child care providers, the community library, perhaps law enforcement. So and that list got longer and longer because one connection would lead to another. So we said, well, let's just set a meeting for this first date and start reaching out to people, and we did that. We had our first meeting in December. It's great. We had about 14 people there. The contact list from that meeting was expanded to include more individuals, more resources, more agencies. We had our second meeting late in January, with the third meeting coming up next month. So right now, our focus is to plan a community event, much like the one you just heard about, the CSSU early education event, and we're going to call it a Community Hero Day. Very simple, with the idea of making a very attractive event to get the families of these youngest children together, have them at our school, have them have access to a lot of different community resources, and most importantly, have them begin to build a relationship with the school. That's really, again, very simple. We're at our early stages, but I think the potential is great. Any questions?
Do we, I'm not sure if this question's directed at, but do we find that the parents of the at-risk kids are also not comfortable in the schools?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's one of the many reasons why when we researched for the white paper, we tried to survey a mass number of parents. Probably didn't get as much response as we would have liked. But I'm sure Victoria can tell you that's a lot of the work that she does, is trying to reach those parents who may or may not have had a good experience with their school. And for them, it might not be positive to think about the school connected with early childhood, or their kids are being taken care of by a family friend because of their resources, and really resistant to that. So that's part of what I think all this work is trying to do, is to find other ways to engage those families so that they'll start to feel more comfortable.
And value education.
Exactly.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Greg. So I can't sort of emphasize enough, we have some really great things. Those are two great examples. In Heinsberg right now, Heinsberg is in its second year of receiving the Vermont Community Preschool Collaborative Grant, and we are partnering with Annette's preschool to just be really innovative about, first of all, that big issue of access, finding more kids, or providing more kids access. But also, that grant this year is really focused on the collaboration between the Triple E program at Heinsberg and Annette's, and how can they work together. They share students. They have students who go to Triple E at Heinsberg and then get on the bus and go to Annette's for the rest of the afternoon. So how do we partner better with them? There's a lot of energy around early ed here, and a lot of really innovative, creative work that I think you all should be really proud of. So, questions? I think we have 5 minutes for questions.
No, just to put it in context, and I should just start this, but I'm usually so excited that we're done with the business part that I forget. But really, this year we're supposed to be looking at our student support services, and so this was kind of funny coming in the middle of the year, but this is really where it all starts, and trying to put everything in all of our discussions, the sections in that context. This is a pretty foundational piece, so thank you for all the work you've done on it.
Is this the first time this is being done in Chittenden County?
So by this, I mean sort of
this collaboration and this focus on the young?
So, no, I think in many of Chittenden County communities, there's a lot of energy around this. South Burlington's had an initiative. I think every community sort of approaches it a little bit differently. There are some that have been involved in early ed for a really long time. So Act 62, Chittenden South, Burlington, South Burlington, those three schools have been, at least from an ELP perspective, have been involved for a number of years. But some communities really are new to this and are really excited about the universal pre-K law because it's going to start this conversation in their communities. But I would also say that a lot of what they just described is really unique to our system. And what I like about CSSU's approach is in our early ed leadership team meeting, we had this conversation about what of this work can be driven by the SU and what has to be local. And each of our communities is very different. So Williston's, what they're addressing is unique to they have a large number of childcare programs, and really that raising the quality of those programs is important to them. Charlotte has one or two and some home providers. So all of our communities are different. The leadership team allows all of our communities to be able to work in a way that makes sense for their context, but bring all that work back so that we can learn from each other.
Anyone can ask a question. This isn't just a CSSU. Anybody over there? All right. Anything else? Great. Thank you, Megan. I'm always astonished by the breadth of programs that you run. Thank you very much. With help. So move to adjourn? Second. Thank you.